We are opening up the Locked On 49ers mailbag today, talking NFL draft, the one Brandon Aiyuk trade that actually might make sense for the San Francisco 49ers and learning from past mistakes. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. David in the live stream says, never make it to the live shows, but always listen. Best sports podcast, hands down. Love it. Appreciate you, Dustin. We were talking about our listeners in Oklahoma and Brazil last time out. So people are showing up from Guam and Pompeii and Pohnpei. I don't even know where that is.
I don't either. If I had to guess, sound like something like near Thailand or something, but I have no idea. Now people are going to clearly know I failed geography class.
Fantastic stuff there.
Hey, real quick, before we get to 49er news, are you shocked at all at the Odell Beckham contract details? What?
15 mil with $3 more million in incentives, so you can make up to $18 million with the Baltimore Ravens. I'm more surprised that he went to Baltimore because I think that's pretty telling of knowing who their quarterback is going to be and that Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere.
I thought maybe he'd be a fit for the 49ers because you just never have enough good players. But he got $15 million guaranteed. I mean, that's I really thought he would have to have like a prove-it deal and sign somewhere like the 49ers, right? Got a good situation going there, a bunch of weapons. You don't have to be the guy. And go make your, $4 million, maybe with incentives it could be $6 million. I never in a million years thought 15 guaranteed and like up to $18 million. Like that wasn't nowhere near what I was thinking.
Here we go. We got Brazil showing up in the chat. Appreciate you, Yuri. And RDC says, Thailand, not a bad guess. It's a Pacific island, he thinks. So we'll find out what the exact locale is of that one. So let's get in the mailbag here a little bit, and feel free, folks, in the live chat to drop your questions in. We're going to try to focus on the NFL draft here. A couple of good questions starting off here about we've been asked what mistakes we made and what we learned from them. And also in the YouTube comments asked about the Brandon Aiyuk trade. And if we could elaborate on something I said last time about a trade that could make sense. First of all, let's start here with Brandon Aiyuk. I don't think Brandon Aiyuk's going to get traded. He does not have to get traded. We went through all the salary cap stuff, how the 49ers can work this out with Debo and Brandon Aiyuk and keep this going long term. But if the 49ers think that at some point they're not going to be able to re-sign Brandon Aiyuk, or that he might want out to be more targeted somewhere else and not be behind some other players on the 49ers depth chart, especially with the way the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan runs his offense, and not being a high volume in the passing game when you've already got Debo and George Kittle and obviously the run game that the 49ers have, then you have to at least listen to offers if you're the 49ers. And I talked about how I'm turning down late first-round picks because I think there's only a certain group of players who are legitimate, the elite of this class. And I think there's about 15 of those guys. And so I picked pick number 15. Just so happens the pick number 15, Croc, is where the Green Bay Packers select in this draft. And the Green Bay Packers were noted as a team, one of the teams, maybe the team that the 49ers needed to go up in front of in the 2020 draft to get Brandon Aiyuk, because the Green Bay Packers were about to take him. And instead, they ended up with Jordan Love. And Jordan Love needs receivers. If you're going to get rid of your Hall of Fame quarterback, as it looks like the Green Bay Packers are, you need to load up on talent for that young quarterback to help him play up. So that's the thought process of potentially, specifically the Green Bay Packers and Brandon Aiyuk. And maybe that would match up in a trade. And you would have to really consider the 15th pick in the draft and consider that trade of Brandon Aiyuk, knowing the roster crunch you might potentially have going forward. And, Croc, this past weekend, we got together and did the Locked On Network mock draft, which is always a huge extravaganza. I'm always a big part of it with Matt Williamson, and we do a lot of the breakdowns and basically hosting the whole thing, and all the hosts make their picks for their favorite teams. And there's a lot of trade talks going on in this, and it was really fun to get all the hosts together in a live chat. And the 49ers didn't have any picks, but I was trying to talk trade just to be involved with it and a little bit more, and getting some of my some of my thoughts in about some of the picks that were happening. But when 15 was on the clock, and Peter Bukowski, the host of Locked On Packers, was trying to sell the pick. It was talking trades, and I asked him about Brandon Aiyuk, and he said that they would be interested. He said that is a trade that makes a lot of sense to him from the Packers to give up pick 15 for Brandon Aiyuk because this draft class, because the way this, and I don't want to spoil the whole mock, but Jackson Smith-Njigba is highly thought of in our Locked On circles, and he is the top receiver in this class, and he was already off the board when Bukowski was going to make his pick at 15. And in the end, we did not swing a deal like that, but from a 49ers perspective, that's when you have to start listening, when you start talking about a top 15 pick for Brandon Aiyuk. And I don't think it's unrealistic that the Green Bay Packers could potentially be interested in offering the 15th pick. And Croc, at that point, do you think it's time to listen for the 49ers?
100%. You have to listen. And one thing that we know about the 49ers, they will listen. Right now, that doesn't mean they'll pull the trigger, but they're going to do their due diligence. And we've been hearing John say that since this regime got on board. I think for the Packers, trying to figure out if it makes sense for them, right? They just drafted Christian Watson in the second round. What do you have? 9, 10 touchdowns? And most of them, like the second half of the season when he started to come on strong, I thought, Christian Watson, he was my wide receiver 2 in that class, and super productive kid, figuring it out. They also have Romeo Doubs, the kid out of Nevada. So he's a guy that I think early on, it looked like he was getting it maybe a little bit faster than Christian Watson, and then Watson caught up and maybe surpassed him. Dobbs dealt with some injuries and whatnot. But how much do they like the combination of those two guys to throw in a first-round pick and a guy that you potentially have to pay a lot of money to with Brandon Aiyuk? So, that's where I try to figure out if it makes sense for them. Do they just want, right now, Brandon Aiyuk, he'll be a 1,300 or 1,200-yard receiver in our offense. And Christian Watson, he'll be a 1,000-yard receiver in their offense. Romeo Doubs, he can have wherever else. And you just have 3 good receivers to go with Jordan Love. If that's what they're thinking, then I get it.
In the chat, 187 says, what about the Giants? They need a wide receiver 1. And they do. And I would be shocked if the Giants wouldn't be completely willing to sell their pick, number 25, in the first round to the 49ers. But to that, I say no. And that's kind of where I'm at with this draft class, because I think late round 1 picks, I think they're valuable, but I think in this class, you're getting probably a second round caliber player at that pick 25. And that's just not enough for Brandon Aiyuk for me. So that's why I used pick 15 as the cutoff. And it just happens to be that the Packers are that team there.
Now hold on, because I think we're looking at it like, all right, if you trade away Brandon Aiyuk, you have to fill that spot in the first round. And I don't think so. I think, okay, you move him in the first round, but hey, is there a tackle that you potentially really like, right? A right tackle, because we're talking about the tackle position, right tackle. I mean, unless you just feel really comfortable rolling out there with Colt McKivitz, but that's a spot where it's like, you want to get somebody that you feel like is the long-term answer. And if you have a top 25 pick, and let's say just it's straight up Brandon Aiyuk for the number 25 overall pick. Well, the 49ers have 11 draft picks in this draft. Like, they're not going to utilize all those. So could you package some of those and actually move up to about pick 18 or so and really go out there and get a more solidified offensive tackle in this class? And I think that would be the more ideal situation, as opposed to going out and trying to replace Brandon Aiyuk 1-for-1 with a receiver.
And that's part of this, Croc. That's the other half of this trade scenario, why I think this is the one trade that does make sense for the 49ers if you were to get an offer of something like pick 15. Because, as Dustin says here in the chat, who would the Niners get at 15 if that trade happened? And to me, there's a player that makes perfect sense that's usually going in that range in mock drafts, and it's not a wide receiver, it's an offensive tackle. You're not trading Brandon Aiyuk to get another wide receiver in that spot. That's not what you're doing here. You're doing this to get an offensive tackle that could be a starter right away for you at right tackle, and then potentially be the blindside protector long-term for you when Trent Williams decides to hang it up and he's gone. And that player to me is Broderick Jones out of Georgia.
Yeah.
He is a supremely athletic, prototype, height, weight, speed, offensive tackle, arm length. He's everything you could want. A little bit raw, which is why he's not a top 5, top 10 pick, and he's probably a top 15 pick. Although who knows? He's the offensive tackles go high. It's a premium position in the NFL. Some of these offensive linemen, and it happens a lot in the NFL draft where the offensive linemen are the ones that go higher than people expect because they're not the sexy positions, but everybody needs one. But to me, it would have to be a trade that happens on the clock, and someone like Broderick Jones, maybe Paris
Johnson out of
Ohio State, right? Someone who has that prototype ability and length to be not only a good run blocker, not only fit the 49ers blocking scheme, but be a really good pass blocker long-term at left tackle that could start his career off at right tackle for the 49ers.
Or guard. I mean, now, 49ers might not need a guard because you have Banks, you have Burford, but, I mean, he played a lot of guard at Ohio State as well, so he has, like, the experience of playing inside. Even though while he was inside, he was this longer guy, and it's like, no, that's an offensive tackle, right? Yeah, and then he played a lot of tackle. And they have another tackle as well that played at the right tackle spot for Ohio State, who's highly thought of. So I think there will be some guys, again, maybe not top 5 overall pick caliber offensive tackles, but when you start talking about the second half of the first round, there'll be some guys that if I'm the 49ers and I am able to swing a Brandon Aiyuk in this hypothetical situation, those are guys I'd be strongly interested in.
And then you could go back to wide receiver in the draft after that with one of those third-round picks. Jonathan Mingo would probably be part of my plan right here. He's one of my favorites. Croc, you haven't watched him yet, have you?
I have not.
Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver from Ole Miss. He's one of my favorites in that third-round range. I think he would fit Shanahan. He'll block you. He's a big, strong wide receiver. Maybe you go to the veteran market. Now OBJ's off the market. That was kind of one of the things I was kicking around in my head this weekend thinking about this question. And lo and behold, Sunday, Odell Beckham signs with the Ravens, and the 49ers, he kind of priced out of where the 49ers most likely would have been if in a scenario like that. But that would be the immediate way to help you out at wide receiver while you trade away someone like Brandon Aiyuk to get a starter in there. And so, more difficult now that Odell Beckham's not out there to make this happen. But you would have to have a trade that not only makes you better in the future, but makes you better right now. And would someone like Broderick Jones for Brandon Aiyuk which would end up being the pick swap there. You get a cheap, young, ultra talented offensive tackle who plays the right side now, makes you better now, and makes you better in the future because he's a future blindside protector for whoever your quarterback is in the next few years. And who knows what we're going to go through the next few off seasons at quarterback to figure that out. But to me, it's the one Brandon Aiyuk trade that does make sense. When I've said all along, I don't think he's going to get traded. And in the end, I don't think they're going to get that trade offer and have to make that decision anyway.
I've seen a lot more weird things happen. Because again, I go back to 2018. And if you would have said, hey, man, 49ers are going to move off of Trent Brown, I'd be like, yeah, right. Then they draft McGlinchey, and I'm like, what the heck they would draft McGlinchey for? You got Trent Brown. Like, is Trent Brown going to be traded? Then he's traded, right? And Trent Brown, people forget this part, but he was a terrific pass protector. He was not great in the movement things in the run game. And clearly 49ers value that, maybe even more than protecting the passer. So that was something interesting that I would have never thought would happen heading into the draft. But we have seen them do some things. I mean, DeForest Buckner, just when he was traded, would have never thought Defoe would get moved. And I remember that morning, I believe it was, someone said, hey, man, there's somebody on the 49ers, kind of a big-time player being traded. And Buckner was not a name that popped up in my head at all. I probably went through 10 other guys before I got to DeForest Buckner. And then it was ultimately him. So trading away Brandon Aiyuk, it seems like, like they really like him. But, man, they kind of cutthroat when it comes to these business decisions.
Next, what mistakes have we made, Croc? And what did we learn from those mistakes as it pertains to the NFL draft? And more of your 49ers NFL draft questions next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever needed a little help in your life? Maybe you've had a big event, or maybe you're just having trouble hitting those points every week that you need to in your life. And getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because you're always growing and you're always changing as a human being. Therapy is about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Croc, we were asked on Twitter to sort of evaluate ourselves a little bit. And I think self-scouting is a big part of any evaluator's process, right? Whether it's an NFL team or whether it's us talking about the draft every year, talking about this football team every day here on Locked On 49ers. Coach T says, got a question for at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker. Who is the player that you thought would make it in the NFL, but turned out that you would not make it in the NFL, but turned out to be really good? Was there something you missed on tape? Do teams self-assess why they miss on guys, good or bad? Croc, who's your miss?
All right. So it's not a complete whiff, but this guy has blown away the expectations I have for him. I think for a lot of people, it's probably clearly obvious that he'd be a special talent. I had some concerns. Maybe I overvalued those concerns, but I got to go with Ja'Marr Chase. Right, like when I watched Ja'Marr Chase in college, it was clear you see all the special things and his ability to make the contested catches down the field, and he was a big play waiting to happen. And it was a really weird eval for me because I felt like the same way he won, he lost that way as well. He wanted to play a lot of bully ball. Guys were really getting their hands on him at the line of scrimmage. I mean, like just beating him up at the line, and then sometimes he'd fight through it. And it's like, well, how consistent can that be at the next level? You know, he's going against Jalen Ramsey. Is he going to just be able to be more physical than Jalen Ramsey every single play? So those are things that I just thought, you know, he was my wide receiver too. I had him behind Devontae Smith, who Devontae Smith's been really good as well. But, you know, it's like, generational, like, okay, all that. And then he goes out and he's on a tear, right? And he's probably everything and more than maybe even some people thought he would be. So I think for me, looking back on the evaluation of him, who I did like, but not to the extent maybe of others, just really chalking it up to, look how a guy wins. How does that translate to the next level? And sometimes can guys be even more of the exception because he has special traits, which he ran in the 4.3s. I know it was a weird year. I think COVID offseason, so they were timing different and everybody was kind of fast, but he showed that breakaway speed, he showed the run after catch ability, and he always had the ability to catch the ball down the field. I do think one thing really helped. I think having Joe Burrow, a guy who played with in college, helped because Joe Burrow really trusted him in college, and he'd throw the ball downfield and he'd catch the ball over a DB, super contested, but then the next time down the field, they'll throw it and it might get picked off. And I think Joe Burrow was a guy who was not going to be, you know, oh man, like I'm going to go away from him because it's too hard to complete those passes to him. He still airs it out. And I think we've seen that from the start of his career in the NFL, his ability to continue to do that. So I'd say if there's a guy that I kind of really evaluated, I don't know if I was necessarily wrong on the eval, but I underestimated or overestimated how much something might be an issue.
Yeah, no, that's important is you know, you can write out strengths and weaknesses for any prospect. But you also have to realize, do these weaknesses even matter? Or does the strength he has even matter? And sometimes you overvalue some strengths, you know, like flat out speed. Oh, this guy's got 4.3 speed. He must be a great deep ball receiver. And it's like, no, there's other things that go into being good at this than this one thing. And then on the other side of it, yeah, there's times when you see a weakness in a guy's game, but does it really matter if they consistently win with the other stuff that they do? And you had me convinced about Ja'Marr Chase as well, Croc, in 2021. I was Devontae Smith guy. We had talked about Devontae Smith from the year before during the Aiyuk draft and the Jerry Jeudy stuff. It's like, this other guy at Alabama is even better than Ruggs and Jeudy in Devontae Smith. And I think he is in the NFL. But yeah, and I think wide receivers are one of the more difficult positions to evaluate too, I think. And I didn't really miss on Aiyuk in a way that I thought he was going to be bad. I just didn't think he was going to be worth the trade up. I had him as like the 30th player. The Niners were picking at 31 that year. It's like, pick him there. You don't need to trade up for him. Cause then there's other guys that you could have had. You could have
Higgins, Michael Pittman, guys are 1,000-yard receivers as well.
But it turns out he's a lot better than Michael Pittman. T. Higgins is on par with him, and T. Higgins is a really good player too. But that trade up,
Pittman.
I'm
not saying that he's better than Aiyuk, but Pittman's been pretty damn good.
He's okay. He's not bad, but I think every team in the league and everyone listening to this podcast would take Aiyuk over Michael Pittman.
Pittman has. I mean, I look at his situation.
Croc liked Pittman a lot. He can't quit him.
I had him. Brian Edwards. I liked him a lot too.
Oh, another one. Yeah. See, wide receivers are hard. Judy, I thought Judy was wide receiver 1 in 2020, and Justin Jefferson turned out to be much better. Aiyuk's been much better. I think Judy's still good, but there's those things you see, and it's like, man, Judy's scouting report has come to life in the NFL, and it's correct. But like you mentioned, Croc, where some things don't matter on a weakness, this weakness for Judy matters a lot, and it's that catching in traffic and being tough at the catch point, winning dirty, and he's got the quicks. He gets open, but his catch rate is just not good enough. He's dropping too many balls, and he hears footsteps, I think. And that can be a death knell, I think, for some wide receivers, and we'll see what it looks like with Sean Payton. But I think wide receivers might be one of the most difficult positions to evaluate in the NFL. And so many factors. What team you end up on, what offense do you get a really good quarterback that trusts you, like Joe Burrow? If Jamar Chase goes somewhere else, is he as good right away? Maybe not.
Right. Well, you talked about the guy, and we talked about Jamar Chase, right? And maybe, oh man, he was even better than I thought he might be. But when you look at other guys who were not good, and I'm like, man, I really like this guy. 2 guys come to mind in the same class as Deebo Samuel. I really like Deebo Samuel. I love Deebo Samuel. I had to fight in my mind with putting him as wide receiver 1 because I like DK Metcalf as well. And to me, Metcalf, who a lot of other people kind of misevaluated, because they're looking at the wrong things when it came to him. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, and he's really quick. He just didn't have great change of direction. But people equated poor change of direction with poor quickness, which was not necessarily the case with him. He was very powerful and quick at the line of scrimmage, and then he had the ability to run away from guys. And I felt like he didn't have to run a whole lot of routes. So I thought people overvalued that part when it came to him as a prospect, and we saw how that turned out. But I had him at 1. I had Deebo and A.J. Brown at 2 and 3. Now, the next 2 guys, so we start talking about where you could kind of miss. And I didn't miss on like N'Keal Harry. I didn't think he would be that great. He's not. And I thought Jamar Chase was kind of in that realm with him, but faster. And we see it's worked out a lot for Jamar Chase. But in the sense of their abilities, in the sense of their, like, how they win, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities with DK and Jamar Chase, what you're talking about, right? Like people knocking him for similar reasons and then realizing that's not that important because he wins this other way so well.
Right.
This other stuff doesn't matter. You're not going to line him up in the slot and run whip routes anyway. So why does that matter? He's not a double move guy. He's like, I'm going to body up. I got a slant. I'm going to blow right through the gate because you're not going to stop me because I'm 6'4" and 4'3", and you got to worry about my top end speed. And I've got ball skills and I can track the football deep too.
So 2 guys that I had at wide receiver 4 and 5 in that class who just, I mean, where are they?
Hey, I know who one of them is. He's coming back. Battlehawks legend in the XFL right now, Hakeem Butler. He's got 6 touchdowns. He's coming back to the NFL. He's making a comeback, Croc. We're going to be right about Hakeem Butler after all. You just wait.
But Hakeem Butler and Riley Ridley, like those were the 2 guys. And Riley Ridley, you watch his film, he did a lot of things. I mean, very fluid, top of the routes, catch the ball. Like all those things look really good. His testing was terrible. I mean, it was very poor. And it's like, well, dang, how much does the testing, translating to the next level with certain things? I mean, his vertical jump was like 31 inches. Didn't run a good 40-yard dash time. Like the change of direction, like everything wasn't good. But it's like, dang, you watch him on film, and it's like, nah, the film looks fine. And it turned out, for whatever reason, just not good in the NFL. Maybe, who his quarterbacks were. Maybe it was the offense. I don't know. Maybe it's because he was wearing number 88. I don't know what it was, but it didn't work. And I don't even know where Ridley is right now. But between him and Hakeem Butler, and Butler was more hit and miss, which I knew at the time. But again, he had all the traits. I mean, talk about being 6'6", whatever he was, 220 pounds, ran in the 4.4s. It's a guy that could run. I thought he was able to sink his hips for somebody as tall as he was. And he had a lot of good traits, and it just, for whatever reason, didn't work out. And then they're like, oh, no, he's a tight end. Then, oh, no, now he's a battle hawk or whatever,
I'll throw one more name out there, and it's a recent 49ers draft pick that was a super head scratcher to me, and that was Aaron Banks. and I didn't see it on tape. I didn't see the fit in the offense. I was like, what is this draft pick? He didn't play as a rookie. I was like, well, that was a wasted draft pick, a second round pick, a top 50 pick. That was super weird. And then he comes into year 2, starts every game, and was one of the 49ers most consistent offensive linemen at left guard in his second year. It changed his body a little bit. So, I think our evaluation, and we both agreed, and a lot of times we do agree, and we watch guys separately, and then we'll talk about it on the podcast, and, we see a lot of the same things. He became a different player, and that's the one thing that's the most difficult about all of this is who the human being is, who he is from the neck up. How smart are they? How tough are they? How hard are they going to work to get better? And I think that's where the 49ers really liked Aaron Banks. That's something that we can't really even know about because we don't get to know the person when we're scouting just the film, and you don't have the reports from school, and you don't get to meet the person and know that what you can expect from them from a character standpoint in a lot of times. So Aaron Banks came back and did what he needed to do to be an NFL player. And now he's a starting caliber guard where it looked like it was going to be a wasted draft pick.
Yeah, being able to deal with adversity. I mean, that's a huge part of it because you can really tank it, especially once you get in that NFL. Here's the thing, right? The realism of the NFL. If you've been playing this game all your life, and you played in college, and maybe you were a highly recruited guy, so you get to college and you're kind of the man, and you're able to dominate at a certain level, and then you get to the NFL. And one thing, there will be like some roster politics, but at the end of the day, these are all NFL guys. And the difference between a starter and a backup, more times than not, is very, very, very slim. And when you are a backup, but you're a guy that's used to being the guy, and starting to understand that, dang, this is not college, and this is truly a business. And that part can kind of weigh on guys, and then they lose like that thing that made football so fun to them. Because like, man, it's not fun. It's not fun being a scout team guy every day and looking at this guy, and I feel like I could play better than him. But then, and then you deal with that, and how much do you embrace the process of that? And I've seen it with a lot of guys. So with Aaron Banks, when we watched his film, and we're like, what the hell are they talking about? He's like the complete opposite of everything that they're saying he is. And him not playing at all his rookie year, the only person to take less snaps from that was drafted in that second round than Aaron Banks was Kyle Trask, who was like the 4th string quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's like, this dude was not playing. And it wasn't normal for a guy to not play that was drafted that high, especially at a guard position where when you're drafted second round as a guard, that might as well be a top 15 type pick the way they view it. Like you're a guy that they want to come in and play right now. And it wasn't happening. Why wasn't it happening? Because he clearly wasn't a fit. I don't want to hear about, well, they drafted him to play left guard and they had Laken Tomlinson and, no. If he can play, they're not going to play Daniel Brunskill over him. They want him to play over Brunskill. Clearly, you see what they did with Spencer Burford. They wanted Burford to play over Brunskill. They wanted Aaron Banks to play over him. And he just couldn't do it because of where he was at in his development. But kudos to him with not getting down on himself, really taking to the coaching, really understanding what they were asking of him to become a better version of himself. And he did a tremendous job of that and probably should have won, all kind of awards for resiliency because he did a terrific job coming back. A guy that a lot of people were really worried about and really had very low expectations for heading into the 2022 season.
All right, a couple more questions here. We'll finish up this episode of Locked On 49ers. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, double plays are back, and there's no better plays to get in on the Major League Baseball action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. I'm not going to talk about Aaron Judge home runs that I'm prompted to right now. It's a sore subject for Giants fans with no Aaron Judge, but they're actually hitting right now, okay, and hitting some bombs, which is a little bit surprising.
Get some pitching though.
Go bet on those Giants while you still can before they get to those 107 wins again. It's going to be one of those magical seasons. I don't know, but it's fun all summer long, every day betting on Major League Baseball. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Real quick note on missing in the draft, and this is probably the biggest miss any teams have, is because someone doesn't love football enough. And RDC brought that up. And I think of a guy like Dorial Green Beckham. I was like, oh, dude, this guy's amazing. He's going to be the next great wide receiver, the next Randy Moss. He's 6'5", 4'4" speed, jump balls all day. He was like a dunker on the basketball team, right? Like he was just a super athlete. I thought this guy's going to be awesome. But he's a knucklehead, didn't really care. Was, screwing around doing drugs and whatnot, and instead of trying to get better as a football player. Steve Keim, former Arizona Cardinals GM this week, was talking about Robert Nkemdiche, who everyone thought he was the number one recruit in the country when he went into college. And everyone thought he was a top 10 talent, top 5 talent in the NFL draft, fell to the end of the first round because of character concerns. They drafted him, and he didn't love football, didn't care to work on it, and never became a really good NFL player and washed out of the league pretty quickly. So that's the number one thing, and it's probably the hardest thing to know, especially from where we sit.
It is very difficult. The level of preparation that it takes to be consistently good at the NFL level. And that's why sometimes you see guys come in and they might have a good year, but then they kind of fall off because, like, do they just love the process and do they just have that drive to be like the best, year in and year out? And there are certain players that people don't necessarily care for, or the way that they carry themselves. Let's say like a Jalen Ramsey. Right. And there are a lot of people that, oh man, but Jalen Ramsey has been good for a lot of years because he prepares at a very high level every year. That preparation does not fall off. All right. A lot of guys that I got to witness, you see how they prepare, and it's not quite there. And there were guys that I was, next to in the locker room, and I'm just looking like, man, how are you this big, this freakishly athletic, but they're so consistent? It's because they've won a certain way their whole life. And then that's just it. Okay, I'm here at the NFL level. I was a first-round pick. I don't have to go above and beyond in my preparation. I can just go out there and win. And you see the flashes because they are so freakishly naturally gifted, but you don't see the consistency there. And then they just kind of get washed out of the NFL. And NFL teams to keep thinking, let's give them another chance, and maybe we could get something out of them. More times than not, you just can't. So, yeah, the mental part of it is huge. Because there's going to be a lot of days where you're just tired or don't care about what's going on, and you still have to figure out a way to be the best version of yourself, prepare a certain way. And if you don't, you're not going to get the results you're looking for, and the team clearly won't.
Yeah, and that's why you really, truly do have to love it, because that's the thing you want.
And most guys don't love it. Real quick. There are a lot of guys. Everybody that's in this chat right now, we have over 100 people. Shout out to you on the chat. Everybody in the chat listening, they love football. There are a lot of guys that don't love it that way. They really view it as an occupation. And some people don't even view it as so much as an occupation. It's just something that they've been good at their whole lives. So it's like, okay, I get to the NFL, and you see guys just retire randomly, right? It's like they really don't love it like that. They've just been good their whole life. And then when you get to a certain level where everybody's good, it's like, it's not fun having to prepare a certain way, and I don't really love it like that.
Yeah, once you can't just run around. And that's one of the red flags for players in the transition from college to the NFL, is when the only way you win is just because you out-athlete guys. And remember, we always talked about the Peter Warwick thing, where he's like doubling back around and going horizontal on all his punt returns in college, and eventually makes his way through. It's like, you can't do that in the NFL. You got to get upfield, and you can't. Do you remember Noel Devine?
Yeah, YouTube sensation, and
like early days of YouTube sensation. This running back is like 5'6", 160 pounds or something. I think he was a college or a high school player in Florida. He had all these ridiculous, video game joystick runs, and everyone thought, oh man, Noel Devine's gonna be the next great college running back and NFL running back. And I don't think he even was a starter at college. I think he was like a backup at West Virginia or something. And just because the higher you go, every level you go higher and higher, you're less athletic versus your peers. And when you get to the NFL, everyone's a freak, and you just don't straight up out athlete guys every week. And there might be some freaks that still can get away with some things, but you got to be able to win dirty in the NFL.
The NFL, it was a rude awakening for me just going just during OTAs. I remember showing up OTAs, and up until that point, I was not a freakish athlete. I kind of downplayed how athletic I was. I was actually a good athlete in comparison to like normal people. But by NFL standards, I wasn't a great athlete. And nothing put that in perspective more than this South Florida edge rusher. And I used to be able to kind of like will myself to do certain things and beat people on certain things. and I couldn't will myself to beat him in these drills. It was like speed and agility drills, like, and I'm trying hard. And this 6'5", 255-pound edge rusher, I could not beat him in anything. And that's when I was like, man, it's a different beast up here. It's just different. So when you talk about that athletic gap, man, college out again wasn't the most freaky, but I was like, man, I could will myself to win battles and things. Or even in the arena league, you're like, okay, I wasn't the great, but like, yeah, I'm good. NFL is like, dang, this is edge rusher. I can't beat him. And I'm trying hard. I don't even know if he's trying hard. I don't even know if he knows I'm trying hard. But I couldn't get him. That's tough.
That is tough. I want to go to RDC real quick. And he says, does the lack of top end receivers in this draft push Aiyuk's price up? I think it absolutely does. Because if you're a team picking in the middle of the first round, you can't even draft a receiver and reasonably think that player is going to end up being better than Brandon Aiyuk. So I think that's another component of it. If the 49ers are listening to offers on Brandon Aiyuk, and maybe a team could potentially blow them out of the water, but it would take a lot.
I hear that, right? But I think when we say this is not a strong class, going back to that draft, I think it was very like top heavy, right? When you look at, I had Justin Jefferson higher than I think a lot of people, but between, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and then there were kind of the other guys that started to filter in, like the Higgins and the Pittmans and
Ruggs.
And the Ruggs. I wasn't as high on Ruggs as other people, but you can see like some depth there and whatnot. But when you start to get to guys like Aiyuk and kind of how you view him now, he was not quite viewed that like that, right? Like you knew, like, okay, talented receiver. And I remember watching him and saying, man, he'd do some cool things, catch a slant route, like jump over somebody, right? Like you'd see him do some things like, man, there's a lot to this guy. And you could see kind of how he won a certain way. But I think he would have, if he were in this class, where would he be? And I think he would still be kind of that 7th or 8th receiver kind of off the board still.
I disagree. He'd be 7 or 8 because this class doesn't have the Judys and the Ruggs and the CeeDee Lambs to be ahead of him. I think he might end up being, his scouting report would be the same. He'd be a late first round guy, but I think that would make him wide receiver 3 in this class instead of wide receiver 7.
Okay. So I know you like Jackson Smith and Jimmy,
and I think that's really the only one.
Quentin Johnston.
I'm not as big on Quentin Johnston. I think he's a good prospect, but I think teams would, and especially seeing him now, because that's part of it too. Is he's made good. We've seen him in the NFL. We already know how good he is. This other guy's a coin flip. We know how good Brandon Aiyuk is, and he already knows our West Coast, our Shanahan tree terminology. If you're the Packers, and it's like, boom, plug him in. And Jackson Smith and Jigba's not on the board anymore because he already got drafted anyway.
Yeah, and there was guys that went ahead of him. I mean, the kid out of, is it TCU? Went to the Eagles drafted him over the Vikings.
Oh yeah, shoot.
And the funny thing is the Eagles receiver coach, right, at that time sent me film. And now that receiver coach is on the 49ers staff. But he didn't send me film. He hit me. He said, hey, Croc, what do you think about these 2 receivers? Watch them. Give me your scouting report. The 2 receivers, Rager, so that's the receiver I'm talking about, Rager, and Justin Jefferson, right? So I don't know if internally, and he had no say-so, and he's just a receiver coach, but I don't know if they were like, hey, we're looking to draft Rager or Justin Jefferson. So he hits me, and he's like, Croc, what do you think? So I watched both guys in depth. I'm like, this is my opportunity. I watched both guys. I have tons of notes on them. And I said, ultimately, if I'm the Vikings, Eagles, he was on the Eagles receiver coach. If I'm the Eagles receiver coach or Eagles, I take Justin Jefferson. I told him I take Justin Jefferson. It's not even a question. Just watching them break down like my notes, the pros, the cons. It's like, hey, you take Jefferson. And they took Jalen Rager. And they're probably still kicking themselves over that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was like the pick before that too. I think, didn't they go back?
Yeah. It was like they went back to back.
Yeah. Question here from Niner Gaming. He says, put Jason Poe at fullback and kick him out to be the 6th offensive lineman. What do you think, Croc? Jason Poe season this year? I want to see him at fullback. I want to see him at guard. I want to see him on the football field for the 49ers. I love me some Jason Poe. I want to see him taking snaps at center as well. He was pretty much, I think, only playing guard last year for the 49ers. And I'm excited for Poe year 2. I'm excited for a lot of 49ers year 2. There's going to be some big year 2 breakouts.
I bet just because of how he's built, he could be a legit fullback. And he'd be a bigger guy, kind of like the guy out of that plays for Baltimore, who's like a 300-pound fullback.
Ricard, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, why can't Poe be that? And you only even got to be 300 pounds. I bet he could slim down and be like 270. And you wouldn't notice that much of a difference in the sense of his size. But he's still, really light, nimble on his feet. We watched it, he put a video out of him running routes. Too. He was, soft hands, nimble, light on his feet. And to be able to use a guy like that who clearly knows how to block, understands leverage, still, I think he was a little stiff at the knees, but, he can block, he get out, but he can also catch passes for you. And I don't know if he's running away from anybody, but he showed some high-level ability to be able to play like a fullback position and kind of be a hybrid of a guy who is fullback, you line him up, you motion him, you can do some things with him, he can block, he can catch the ball a little bit, you can sneak him out. It would make a lot of sense to kind of try to see, hey, Poe, what do you look like? You got to change his number a little bit, but I think that would give them more, flexibility with how you utilize him.
Jason Poe, number 0. Oh. There we go. We found our number 0.
He might be a little too wide for number 0.
I say just keep him 300 pounds and let him be an offensive lineman still, but then put him in the backfield. He doesn't.
Well, you can. I'd say I think it's more beneficial to have him at fullback because you can always use him as a 6th offensive lineman or 7th offensive lineman, no matter his number. But when you have an offensive lineman number, and then you have to report a certain way and things like that. So
yeah. Last one here. This one from Todd says, and thanks everybody for jumping in the live chat and all the questions. With more comp picks coming next year, any chance the Niners use those comp picks to trade up for an impact player this year?
Yeah, because they lost D'Amico Ryan, so they for sure got a 3rd coming.
Yeah, they're definitely gonna have a 3rd next year, and I think that they absolutely should be moving up with their picks if the right player is there, and utilizing all those extra draft picks they have because they have so many picks and they don't have a ton of needs. And the needs they have, if you're talking edge, if you're talking offensive tackle, those are tough positions to find late in the 3rd round. If you can find some wide receivers, you can find some safeties, you can find interior offensive linemen, but if that one offensive tackle starts to slip into the 80s, I think you got to move up. And I think the 49ers missed an opportunity last year to move up from those comp pick areas. So we'll see if they do it. But I absolutely think that it would behoove them to move up in this draft if the right players fall. You don't just trade up for the sake of trading up.
Of course.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved with the live episode today. And if you've never been on a live with us and you're just listening to the audio version of the pod, come check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe up. Make sure you subscribe up to the Peacock and Williamson NFL show as well. Thanks for making us your first listen every day here on Locked On 49ers.